later that the ground is needed at that moment. So I thought maybe grass, you put grass in it, but maybe the ground doesn't need that grass, because when I put grass in here, then if it is Mombasa or other grass, it's not always easy to grow. It grows a few months and then it's away, but I have other, if I left the ground unbare and let grow what grow, that grows much better and also fast, and also material for the tree bed. So there for my question.
Are they other types of grass species, or are they more like broadleaf things that are growing?
Me or
yeah, the things growing on their own that you didn't seed there, are they other types of grasses, or is it like broadleaf weeds?
Yeah, the things what I had was stinging nettle. That's a very useful plant. I have they call it Cinderella nodiflora. It's about it gives yellow flowers, and it has a lot of hair roots. So it's hard to pull out of the ground, but you can prune it easily. So it gives a lot of biomassa, and you can you prune it easily. So it's nice to work with, and I didn't plant it, but yeah, suddenly it was here, and I can't get rid of it because it grows so fast, and so yeah. But normally the most common is also grass here, but at barren lands. So there's nothing growing than grass.
Is the stinging nettle the same nettle you would get in Northern Europe, or is it different?
Yeah,
yeah.
The same one? This one doesn't sting. You have these stinging. When I come from Holland, and when I live in Holland, I was fallen once. I was fallen in stinging nettle, and this looked like if you had a fire, it's burning all over your body. But the variety I have here, it doesn't sting. Maybe the climate or so. I don't know, or it is another variety. I don't know. But my chicken love it. It's growing fast, and the soil take it fast, so it doesn't decompose. Or it does decompose quick. Sometimes it's an advantage, sometimes disadvantage. But if you need to feed the ground, then it's a good one to use if you want to quick feed the ground. Yeah, but that's my experience. Yeah.
What's up, everyone? Everyone good?
Yeah.
Brilliant. Good to see all the usual suspects again. Nice one.
Good morning, Felipe. Good
morning, Felipe. I was actually recording a video, and it was just jolly, and it's on coffee harvest and pruning and drying, and then I went on to record how to brew the coffee, and then it got really romantic, and I really took my time, and I was almost late for the meeting here. I looked at the watch, I had the water in, and I was recording everything. I actually burnt the coffee. I was actually showing how not to burn the coffee, and I ran here to get the computer and the coffee. I'll have to re-record all of that. Very good.
I was trying to get into this meeting earlier because I thought the time was 3 o'clock GMT -3, so that would have been 6 o'clock here, but it wasn't. It's 7 o'clock, just after 7 now. So I was just confused in case I don't know, maybe it's the British summertime we go forward an hour or something, maybe.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure it is GM3 -3. I know that at times of the year from here to the UK, there are times where we're 2 hours away, and there's times where we're 4 hours away.
Yeah, it must be 4 now, eh?
Yeah, so depending on the combination, that varies throughout along the year. Brazil, the current president actually cut out summertime, so we're not actually changing watches anymore. You just come in with a new law and that's it. There's no more summertime or changing on the clock and that. I find that a bit strange. But anyway, so what's up? Felipe, he's around. He's probably brewing his coffee there, like like always. We last minute coffees just to make sure we pop into the meeting well. So let's have a look at some of our questions here.
What's up, guys?
This is
sorry, I'm late.
Yeah.
I was.
What's up, Felipe? Everything good?
Everything good. I was just getting my coffee ready, as usual. What's up, everybody?
Kind of guessed.
Patrick, are you in your car again?
I am. The house is busy with kids just now, so I thought I'd take myself outside.
Okay.
Too nice to sit in the shed, so I'll sit in the van.
I see. That's a good one.
That's it. We like to see it. Keen.
Are we live on YouTube?
Yeah, we're
Does it
live.
work?
Yeah, Felipe showed me the ropes today on how to activate all the meetings, and it was a little
Not
bit
so
nervous.
hard, right?
No,
kind of-
yeah, followed step-by-step instructions there, so done it just in time.
Cool.
I was just saying because I was recording my coffee video and I was, time caught up, time flew because it was just really pleasant and jolly and lovely, and time just went flying. I had an hour and a half to record a video, and when I saw it, I had to set everything up. Anyways, fine. Really.
So just what's up, my time in Myanmar has come to an end. Between COVID and a military coup, I'm not going back there, which is very, very sad. So we'll,
Really?
Yeah.
So there's a military coup happening there.
Oh yeah, it was on 1st
boy.
of February. 1st of February. So it's been going. They've been in control now for about 5 months.
Yeah, that's crazy.
Yeah. So
yeah, better to stay away for a while, I guess.
Yeah. So all the work that I've done there, I don't know what's going to happen to that.
Yeah.
The guy that I employed to help me is still working there, but we can't get money into the country, so we're running out of money fast over there. So
I see.
My project could come to a screaming halt in a hurry, which is very sad.
That's a pity. That's a pity.
A lot's happening, a lot's changing, and we hope it's temporary. We hope all of this stuff is temporary and it's not, Yeah,
there are some places in Africa which are kind of hardcore. I remember even Mozambique, which is they were under military government. I think 20 years ago, but still there's lots of tension happening all the time everywhere.
Yeah.
And I remember traveling with the guys over there, and they would say, this area here, this is still an active landmine field, so we really have to be careful. You just got to follow the road. Every now and then somebody blows up on a landmine. I was like, wow, that's a very tense place to live in.
That's it.
But yeah.
So if anyone's on YouTube watching, just so you know, this is our Q&A for the patron community. We'll answer their questions that they've placed on the platform. If we have any time towards the end, if you have any questions here on YouTube, we'll try to answer those. All right. So from what I'm seeing here, we've got three questions only. So obviously we'll interact. If you guys have anything to ask personally, do so as well. Felipe, what's up? You got the questions up there as well?
Yeah, I have it. I have them. First one's from Eric. He's saying, I often see the grass is planted and growing between the tree beds to feed the tree beds and to establish the soil. What about to give the soil the chance to grow what the soil needs? I left a part barren, and the soil produces stinging nettles and other useful, even edible plants. Then mow this every month, and after a few months the vegetation changed. Would this be a useful idea to feed the soil? Because the soil knows exactly what it needs. That's a great question, man. There is that saying that goes, the weed or the herb that grows on your doorstep is the one that you need, right? It's the one that's going to cure your illnesses or whatever. So that's a great point. And I definitely agree with it. I think it's a very valuable strategy, but I would just add some exceptions, right? Which is and this I explained pretty clearly in the video I made about weeds, when I talked about the good, the bad, and the ugly weeds. So I would always eliminate ugly weeds because they make your life harder. So many weeds that are good for the soil, they're just hard to manage, and they're just going to require more time and more labor for us. So, you know, they're good for the soil, but it's just going to be it's going to make our lives really hard. So I would definitely eliminate those. And another point is, it's important to find plants that will produce as much organic matter as possible. So I would always intervene by adding more stuff to that soil that I know that will grow well. So I think a combination of these two work very well. What my general strategy is, I will always allow the weeds that grow there to grow, and I will use them, eliminating the ugly ones, like I mentioned, right? But I will constantly prune them, and I will add other weeds that will also help me out, so that I have also a succession of species. So I think this is kind of the general idea. Recognize the weeds. Yes, they are necessary for that soil. You know, make sure you eliminate those which will give you problem and make your life hard. And it's more a matter of enriching this weed system than necessarily substituting them. I think that's kind of the idea.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, totally. And you know, sometimes even some of these weeds that are a nuisance that do give us a little bit of trouble, as the seasons roll past and as the years roll past and as the forest evolves, they do tend to be substituted because they've done their job, and then they do tend to as well say goodbye, you know, for their own, you know, without you having to actually fight them off. So they do, you know, once it's not their time anymore, when the work is done, they will remove themselves and something else will replace that. So you can work with those, you know, you can expect nature to look after that. But it's like Felipe said, we're looking for, you know, things that produce biomass, right? So a lot of the time these weeds, they you know, they lose out in volume when we're talking about, you know, producing organic matter on the spot, you know, to feed not only the tree rows, but also to feed itself, you know, to actually feed the soil in between the tree rows. So you can actually enrich in the soil and build soil through this organic matter that's grown on the spot. So obviously when we have more biomass production, you know, so that's why we tend to introduce species that, you know, produce more volume. And when you do that as well, it's intelligent to choose species as well that, you know, appreciate, you know, a little bit of shade. And, you know, as the system develops, these could be different varieties, different types of grasses, different types of plants that will sustain, you know, in between those tree beds, you know, things that will support, will you know, live happily underneath, you know, in that bottom layer. also something we introduce species not only that do biomass production, but also that sometimes that are rich, nitrogen fixing stuff. So, if you got like black velvet beans and things like that, things that are really rich. So there are these things that sometimes just that native weed doesn't offer you, even though, we all know that if you step back and let nature do its work, it does it beautifully and it achieves that abundance. But if we do intervene, we can accelerate that. And that's just it. So, I mean, the weeds do have the power to recover that ecosystem. But if we intervene correctly and introduce the right species, we can accelerate that process.
Yeah,
So
one important thing is to, and this we need to learn. Everybody needs to put some effort into learning that, which is identifying the purpose of the weed, right? So what happens is that weeds will, like if a weed grows in a condition of compacted soil, for example, there is one which is, I think in English it's called Caesar weed. It's from the family Malvaceae, and it has a very strong taproot. And it only grows, or it usually, not only, but it usually grows in heavily compacted soils. So if you have that weed growing there, it is decompacting the soil. But then depending on the kind of system that you're going to make, and if you're going to use tractors to prepare the soil, for example, you can decompact the soil by using a subsoiler. So you're going to do the work that is being done by that weed. Once that soil is decompacted, then you are able to sustain other types of plants. So you don't need Caesar weed anymore. So that's just an example, right? If you have weeds that grow on acidic soil and you're going to prepare the system and you're going to add some lime or some rock dust, you're going to change that soil's chemical environment. So suddenly you're able to sustain another type of vegetation. And actually, the vegetation that you're going to introduce will be even more adapted to the new conditions. So this is all stuff that we need to take into consideration. When we're talking about zero input, like if I'm not going to add anything, if I'm not going to prepare the soil at all, then I'm 100% with the idea that we need to leave the weeds there, most of them, and then just add some extra stuff. That's kind of the idea. So for example, most grasses, or at least Mombasa, for example, it's kind of a demanding grass. Like I cannot establish it here without adding some manure, some lime, some other stuff. So I shouldn't try to do that. It would be much more intelligent to work with what's already happening there, or try to find the grasses that do grow around. So yeah, I think that's kind of the general idea.
Yeah, I suppose it does make a difference if you're working in maybe like on a larger scale system, and then you're not doing vegetable in between the tree rows. And then, you really need to work with what's more native, what's more adapted, because you've not worked that land exactly. If you're going with the system where you like to have vegetables in between the tree rows to establish the forest, in the early stages where you produce vegetables with all the little seedlings and that, then you've really prepared that soil so that, then you really, you can really be, make good use of all that energy that's been left over there and put it all to good use.
Cool.
Anything about that, Eric? That was Eric's question, right?
Yeah.
Does that clarify? I mean, any points you'd like to make?
Yeah, it's correct. But I tried that because I didn't put any manure, any stuff from outside. So then I think just what you said, that's a good system to leave it and see what's happening. And of course, there are a few weeds that is that I don't want. So then it's handwork, but I don't have a large plot, so I can do it by hand. And then I pull it out, and then the weeds are very useful for me, and I think for the system. Then yeah, that and I add some grass, but I have also a problem with the Mombasa grass. It grows, but after a few months, then it's maybe my system is too developed, or too. I have a lot of trees, so maybe it's that I don't know. But I have some weeds that grow just as fast as the Mombasa, maybe little or maybe less biomass, but it grows very quick and it keeps the soil together and it keeps the soil loose. So yeah, that's so. But I think grass, if grass in common that grows, I think it's the much fastest growing species on Earth, and that's the reason why most of the barren soils or barren plots that is covered with grass.
Exactly. Yeah. And I mean, this is pretty much the concept of fallow, right? If you want to, when you fallow a land, you're pretty much just allowing whatever that's going to grow there to grow in order to replenish the soil's reserves. So that's pretty much the idea.
Yeah.
And I mean, the idea of fallow has already passed the test of time. It's a very ancient practice.
Yeah.
And we know it works. Of course, it needs more or less time depending on the level of degradation, right? The level of mining that the soil has been put through. And one idea that I like a lot, especially for when you want to start working with farmers, like small farmers, and you want to start introducing the idea of agroforestry, is to introduce the idea of, let's say, improved fallow, or a directed fallow, which would be fallow with species that you introduce. Yeah. So for example, I know that I'm going to plant this area, I don't know, next year. I'm not going to deal with it this year. So you allow stuff to grow there, whatever weeds come, but you also add other stuff that you know will grow in those conditions, right? So, you know, whatever, pigeon pea, jack beans, daikon radish, whatever it is, there are a bunch of species like for green cover, and you can add that to enrich the fallow of the land, and you will have more biomass production, more microbe stimulation.
Yeah.
And I think this is a pretty interesting idea, especially for larger pieces of land where people aren't going to be able to establish all of the rows of trees and everything. So you just improve the farmer's fallow.
We've got a question
asking, here. Yeah, about the same thing, I guess.
So Pura Vida, who's Pura Vida? Say hello. Do you know, Felipe, who's Pura Vida? We just like to know.
Remember, isn't it our
make friends
from Colombia, wasn't it?
All right.
Yeah, he live in the mountains or something. He has a lot of rain. He is, yeah.
Oh, from India.
Oh.
All right.
I forgot the name of that buddy from Colombia that he showed up once and never showed up again.
Yeah.
Yeah, it slipped me now, but you know, when I see it, I know him.
Yeah, I forgot the name
as well. It's really cool. All right, so he's got a question here. Will growing just the grass or pigeon pea for organic matter mean the soil ends up with certain proportions of nutrients only because grass or pigeon peas have certain nutrients that go back to soil once decomposes? Is my assumption correct? Well, I mean, once you create, you know, organic matter and mulching through that, then you're also creating, you're not only associating, you know, the nitrogen and the nutrients from the plant, you're actually covering the soil and then giving conditions for life in the soil, right? So not only giving back the nutrients from the plants, but also giving conditions so that the soil can, you know, so that you can give good conditions so that there can be life in the soil, right? Is that more or less?
Yeah, that makes perfect sense. I'm just going to add a couple of things. There's certainly going to be a different proportion of nutrients, because the idea of how much nutrient is in the plant's biomass, of course, depends on the plant. And then in for example, legumes usually have a pretty decent capacity for mobilizing phosphorus. So this means that they can get phosphorus where other plants cannot. So this, you know, once they uptake that phosphorus and they bind it in organic matter, once they give it back to the soil, that's going to be more easily available for the plants. So that's one of the reasons why it is interesting to combine at least a few species for biomass production, because you're going to have a more balanced nutrient composition of the organic matter being cycled. And for example, for micronutrients, you're going to have different species of grass. Some accumulate more copper, some accumulate more boron, whatever. So it's always interesting to have at least 2-3 species together as service plants, so that you have a better, a more balanced and more complete composition. But what Gennaro said is correct. You as the more you cover the soil, the more you maintain that blanket, the more microorganisms are going to be working. And they're the ones who actually do most of the work in releasing and making minerals available. When you're talking about legumes, organic matter, you have a slight problem, which is, since they're so high in nitrogen, they will decompose very, very quickly, because they have a very narrow carbon to nitrogen ratio, right? So you can see that, like pigeon pea leaves, they decompose very fast, whereas grass takes a longer time to decompose. So, you know, mulching with legumes alone doesn't last so long. So it's always good to have grass or something else in the mix of service species, right? And of course, the more lignin the plant has, even longer it takes to be digested. The more silica it has, the longer it takes to be digested. So there are these are the 3 main components which will set how long it takes for that organic matter to be decomposed, right? So yeah, that's pretty much it.
Fantastic.
Cool. So second question from Eric, he asked, I see people plant sugar apple trees every meter and left 2.5 meters between the rows. They don't work with agroforestry, but would this work with agroforestry? And what can you plant between the trees and between the tree rows? Because there will be a lot of shade between the tree rows. Yeah, that's a pretty good question. Sugar apple, a medium to low stratum plant, you are once you have adult trees in that spacing, there will be very little room for anything growing in between those rows. Of course, in the beginning, you can plant whatever you want, but once the system is established, the sugar apple will be the lower stratum of the forest. So it's going to be like the bottom layer. You can have some kind of crawling stuff underneath that. One very interesting plant is that I published a video about it recently, which is Plentus Ohanatus. I'm going to write here in the chat, Oh, no, I'm gonna write it in the YouTube chat. Black Plentus Ohanatus. So that's a kind of a crawling plant that withstands quite a lot of shade. So, you know, these would be the things that I would be growing in between those rows, and not only in between the rows, but just as a general green ground cover, you know. But to actually be producing stuff in between, you could think of timing the pruning of the sugar apple, since you have to prune it periodically, and it is a fairly radical pruning because it's gonna, you know, drop its leaves, or either that or you're gonna take the leaves off manually. You get to, like, during that time when you're going to induce flowering, you're gonna have quite a lot of sunlight. So that's a pretty decent moment to plant some short cycle species such as beans, for example, which you can be harvesting in 3 months. Beans will grow very nicely in that sort of environment. You know, lots of organic matter on the soil because you just pruned everything. And they withstand a bit of shade, you know, once the trees start resprouting. So this is my take on it.
Yeah, one thing I noticed on high density conventional systems, this is true for coffee, which is also, you know, not a high or medium to high layer. So it's a low layer plant that does require some shade. What people actually doing, they're super dense in it, where, you know, in the past it was recommended 1.2 meters, 1 meter. People are doing it 60, 70 centimeters apart now. But what actually happens, it's so dense that the leaves, like they go into each other, the canopies actually mix up, and it actually shades itself, you know, through the branches, you're actually shading yourself. That's how dense things are. So you're actually shading off the leaves through the high density, and, you know, how they're actually growing into each other. This is how they're doing, you know, high dense coffee, and they can justify it, you know. So already when you're in a conventional system, high dense like that, and if the branches are actually causing shade to its neighbor, you know, consider that if you have it that dense, and then you know, within forestry system where you've also got things above it, you know, so how shaded off will it be? Ask yourself, if, you know, if in that density your sugar apples are actually shading itself off through its own branches, which is likely that this is actually happening, as it does happen with high dense coffees. So you know, that could be something to consider. Have you seen that, Felipe, where people actually, you know, shading it off with itself, through the high density system?
Yeah, I know that, especially with coffee. People do that, have been doing that with other species as well. I remember a teacher of mine back in college, she was telling me about how people are planting apples at like 0.5 meters apart from each other. What you get when you have such a high density, for sugar apple, it is a bit different because you have to, the sugar apple will either lose its leaves for flowering, or you need to take them out manually. Like you have to clip off the leaves to expose the flowering gem, like the new bud. And also with sugar apple, you have the freedom to shorten its branches as much as you like, because it's only producing in the new shoots, and it's going to lose its leaves regardless, which is different from coffee, right? Which has a bit of a different physiology aspect. But what happens when you have that really dense thing that plants start shading themselves, you create a different, you kind of create a hedge. So you're actually producing in a hedge, and you're going to get decent production from the sides, right, from the edges, but over there in the middle, plants are not going to produce so much. but still you usually get higher production per area. You're probably going to get lower production per plant. I mean, you're certainly going to get lower production per plant, but you're going to get higher production per area, which is, for me, it's what matters the most. In the end of the day, the denser you plant up to a certain point, and I think the certain point is how much you can manage the vegetation. But the denser it is, the more production you're going to have per area, and the more organic matter production as well. So I think that's the most important thing. And also you have to consider quality, because this is also, the denser plants are, you very often start decreasing quality. So you're going to have, for example, for coffee, you might start having smaller fruit, and this is something to consider. And another thing to consider is how rich your soil is. The more available nutrients, the richer your soil is, the more plants you can have per hectare. Right? But if you have a very poor soil, then if you have a bunch of plants together, they might not grow so well. So these are all things to keep in mind when deciding on the density of planting.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Wayne added a question here for the end. We're gonna address that in the end. Let's take Jack's questions. If one species in your system is being attacked by leafcutter ants, does it make more sense to remove that species from the system to stop feeding the leafcutters, or leave it to distract the leafcutters from other more important species? That's a decent question. My personal take on it is it depends on how important that species is for you, right? So if it's not such an important species, I just leave it be. If it is a very important species, like one of my main crops or one of my most important service species, I will either substitute it for another one. For example, here in my place, it's kind of impossible to deal with leaf cutters because we're in an area, I mean, it's a 400 hectares farm, and only a very small portion of it is being used, like half a hectare. And it's basically one huge leaf cutter ant nest. So it would just be silly of me to try to combat it. I could, I just have to be killing it over and over and over again. So I cannot grow eucalyptus, for example. Doesn't work. So I substituted eucalyptus for other species, right? So that's a choice. But eucalyptus is not a main crop. It would be a main service species for me, but I'm using others, which the leaf cutters don't cut as often. So this is one idea. You know, substituting the species. The other idea is to just, you know, kill the ants. It's two options that you have. I'm always up for substituting when possible, but sometimes it's not possible. And then in my case, my main crops, the leaf cutters don't cut them. So it's, you know, I've got pineapple and bananas. They don't attack any of those. So I'm perfectly fine with having my other crops have their leaves cut every now and then. You know, the leaf cutters, they do end up doing something good for the soil. You know, they're kind of putting organic matter in the depths of the soil, which is very few animals are able to do it in a proper way. The beautiful thing about leaf cutters is that, you know, they're bringing organic matter to greater depth, and that organic matter will be colonized by fungi in an oxygen-rich environment because it's inside the nest, right? So burying organic matter is not a great idea because you're going to have decomposing organic matter without oxygen. But then the leaf cutters do that with oxygen. So after the decomposition, you're going to have a pretty decent portion of soil. And of course, there's all the soil movement that they do, and they aerate the soil. Anyway, there's a bunch of benefits you can think of. So if they're not causing real damage to the system, I say just let them be, and they will soon stop bothering you. But if it's one of your main crops, either change the main species or kill them.
Any idea why the leaf cutters go for eucalyptus so badly for you, but they leave alone the whatever you're substituting it with? Like, what is it about eucalyptus, or in my case, it's yucca is what they seem to like the most? Why do they like that so much, but not like some of the neighboring ones? What are they looking for exactly?
Well, the simple answer is that the plant being attacked is not so healthy for one reason or the other. One thing that I don't know exactly, because the leaf cutters, they very clearly choose not only some species, but some individuals among the same species. It's not uncommon for you to see leaf cutters passing through 5, 6, 7 individuals of the same species and then cutting the 7th or the 8th, which is a lot more work for them because they have to travel a longer way, right? So they're very clearly highly selective of what they cut. What I understand is since they take that material to colonize it with fungi, and they actually eat the fungi and not the leaves, they need material that can be attacked by fungi. So if we use that same principle that a healthy plant is not attacked by fungi and bacteria, so a healthy plant cannot be used by the leaf cutters for the fungi to colonize that material. So I think they must look for some sort of chemical composition and state of degradation of tissue. It's also very common, they when you prune trees, they will often take the material that has already been pruned, which makes sense because once you prune it and maybe it was there on the soil for a few hours or so, the tissues will start decomposing. So you already have half the process done, and they will pick that. But while it's up on the tree, maybe the cells are so whole and so complete that they won't even bother to cut it. So I think this is kind of the general idea. And then their choice for species, I think it's just a matter of chemical composition, that maybe it's easier for the fungi to colonize that.
Okay, cool.
Well, there's not much more I can add to that. I just like to think, that once you've got enough mulching, enough organic matter on the ground, they do tend to go for that matter rather than necessarily. I've literally never had a problem here in the farm. Obviously, we do have ant cutters interacting in the system, but they've never attacked any of my species. But I appreciate, Felipe's got a pretty healthy system there, and if it's just as easy as that, just to have the mulching and that, it's not as simple as that. But just generally, I find that if you have the mulching in place, you have a nice variety of mulching. If you've got the chippings, wood chippings, but then you've also got the chop and drop stuff, and you've also got the pruning of the trees. So you've got like a banquet of offer, on the ground. And just through those kind of processes, through mulching, through a variety of mulching and just heavy mulching, I've never really come across that problem here in the farm. Obviously, I've got neighbors as well, which have cutting. And we do projects out where, where you're starting at a new unbalanced plot. We've said this in the past. Sometimes certain people are a bit shy to say it, that, we're actually willing to kill off a colony. If that's going to be, if you're going to be unable to produce in that spot, and, if it's not something like an impossible task, like Felipe is in 400 hectare nest of it, if it's coming from just that one spot or that one spot, we're actually willing to actually take that step back, kill that little bit of life, let's be honest, so that you can then produce abundance. And then when they come back in a balanced ecosystem. Sometimes it's so unbalanced that there's just no way you can get around to it. But you know, when they come back into the ecosystem, it's all balanced, and there is a lot of organic matter on the ground now, and then the balance.
Yeah, exactly.
I often find, like, if you have all the good mulching, if you have really nice amount, you know, of organic matter on the ground, shouldn't be a problem. So I mean, I'll be looking at the type of organic matter that you have on the ground, the volume of it, maybe the variety of it as well, you know, so that it has that to feed off rather than your plants.
And in my experience, if you do a good job 1 year after initial planting, the leaf cutters will reduce like in 90% their activity on your plot. This has been my experience in a couple of different places, you know. So if you're, you know, working properly, high organic matter production and all that, after 1 year, you're going to see that their activity has dropped down dramatically. That's and of course, when I believe, I'm not 100% sure of this. This is just some sort of intuition or something. I've never read anything like that, or I mean, kind of. But I think one of the main aspects of it is calcium availability in the soil. So that's why they work a lot. Usually, they're a lot more active in acidic soils. I think it has something to do with calcium availability, because calcium does make cells a lot stronger, so it makes it harder to break down cells of the plant. So I think it might have something to do with it. So, you know, for very acidic soils, if you manage to you know, use some rock dust or some lime, you can already reduce that problem. And not only that problem, but a bunch of other problems as well. Yeah.
Cool, that makes sense. Yeah, I didn't realize they would eat much of the organic matter. That's actually really helpful to know that as we build the organic matter, we're kind of building an alternative food source for them. So we'll keep our fingers crossed that they shift towards that soon as it piles up.
Cool.
Yeah, I do think that's the main strategy to avoid them.
Yeah. What type of pruning does cassava respond best to? I mean, sorry, can I go on?
Yeah,
okay. Raising the skirt or coppicing? I like neither. Actually, raising the skirt, definitely not, because that's going to create a. I mean, it's hard to raise the skirt of cassava. You might take some leaves, but it doesn't produce like lateral branches like that. It kind of starts creating forks, right? You never want to raise its canopy a lot more without structure, because since it's kind of it's not a very hard, it doesn't have a hard stem. If the weight of it starts accumulating too far from the soil, it's going to start losing its balance. But when pruning cassava, what I do is to break the tips. So it's kind of like pollarding. Not exactly pollarding, but kind of like pollarding. So, you know, what I usually do is, it depends on what I'm going to do and what I'm pruning it for. If I want to do a very radical pruning, you know, to open up complete sunlight, I'm just going to leave the main stem and take everything out, you know, just leaving like one big pole there. But if I just want to kind of do a lighter pruning, I'll just go around breaking all of the tips, you know, and just leaving like the main stem and maybe the first fork, the first two forks or something like that.
Yeah, I like to think of it, you know, if you're using it for fruit production, if you know, for the root stock, you know, if you're producing cassava, you know, for the edible root stock, I like to think of it, you know, that you're probably only going to prune it if something went wrong, right? If you're producing cassava to eat the root, you know, once it shoots up and it's just beautiful, and then, you know, if everything goes well, then it's unnecessary to prune, right? Sometimes some things go wrong, like it's been swallowed up by the corn is an example. We saw it in our course that we recorded. Is my video internet unstable? You can hear me there, right?
No, it's working fine
it's
now.
been out overshaded. Cheers. Say it's been shaded out and then it's become really lanky and not strong enough. Now you've removed the corn or anything else that was shading out the cassavas. Then, you know, it's really lanky and not sustaining. You might want to just snip that, you know, then you'll evaluate how high you want to snip that off, where, you know, halfway, so that it can sustain itself standing up, right? So unless something's gone wrong, like it's been outshaded or it's, you know, it's usually because it's been outshaded, it's not a plant that, you know, appreciates pruning. Now, if you wanna have cassavas for other reasons, like, you know, organic mass production or for animal feed through the leaf production, or sometimes even just for information where you're growing it, just to give that extra root information where you're gonna abandon that root, just feed the soil, you know. So there's so many other things that you can use cassavas for that's not food production, and you might be pruning for different reasons, right? So I mean, if I want to renew a vegetable bed and I've got the cassavas there, and the cassava wasn't the main crop, I might want to prune that cassavas to let the light in, so I can plant tomatoes again in that vegetable bed. And then, but you know, cassavas don't appreciate regular pruning for the fruit. You know, I think Enish once said, or you know, whatever, you know, prune it once, but if you're pruning it over and over again, you know, the root's not going to be so, you know, when you cook it, it's not going to be, you know, as soft, and you know, it does affect the quality of the root. So
Yeah,
you can't just, like, you know.
And actually, if you do prune it and you want to harvest the roots, you need to wait like 4 or 5 months so that it kind of replenishes the starch of the root. Because it's a pretty simple concept, right? If you prune it, the plant is gonna resprout by using the carbohydrate reserves in the roots. So what happens is that then it loses the carbohydrates reserves, and that's why the roots kind of lose its softness, and they become kind of hard, full of water. So you need to wait a while for it to replenish the roots reserves. So that's the idea.
That's it. So hence, you know, if it's for food production, if you want to produce, you know, fruit from the roots, ideally, you've planted it, it's booming, it's the consortium, you got it right, and it's come up above everything else, and you know, you're not going to be doing any of the pruning. You won't appreciate it, you know, if you want to harvest the root a year later and that.
And if you know, using cassava as a service species, which I personally do, what I'm working on now is getting the wild varieties of cassava that we have in Brazil. So they don't produce edible roots, and they're a lot more resistant and vigorous than regular cassava, and they last longer. They actually become trees. So we've got species of cassava here that, you know, they become this thick, the main trunk, and it actually becomes a like 5-6 meter tall tree. Actually, the trunk of my car now is filled with these stems that I brought from the semi-arid of Brazil to plant in the farm. So I'm actually going to be doing videos about this pretty soon. So these varieties work great for service species, a lot better than the edible cassava, of course.
Sweet. Okay. Yeah, we had been using it to try to shade some of our young fruit seeds or seedlings, and so it's kind of like clogging some of those lower branches or lower leaves. I guess we're kind of getting in the way of those little seedlings. So I think maybe we're just planting it too close, frankly, to the seedlings. It should be a little further away, maybe, so that we can then, like you said, break off the tips and encourage it to bush out and cast its shade from up there.
Yeah, depending on the situation, you could kind of just, you know, take off some of the bottom leaves.
Yeah.
So, you know, just a little bit. Yeah.
Yeah, from what you're saying, I'd lift the skirt up just so the canopy of your seedlings, you know, it's not clogged up.
Exactly.
It's firm enough, and you know, if you can lift up the skirt, no problem. Probably isn't too dense. It probably isn't too dense. I mean, I can't see, you know, if you've got it, you know, every 50 centimeters, you know, that's that's not too dense.
Exactly.
Just lift up the skirt, so free up the space, since it's not your main crop and things like that. And if you're not breaking the tip off from the top, the chances are it's not considered like a prune. If you're lifting the skirt, it's less aggressive. I don't think it's gonna feel like it's been pruned and it's having to actually re-sprout.
Exactly.
So you can lift up the skirt and
any plant that you have like as a fast grower or a high or emergent stratum plant, you can always use the rule of taking out like the maximum of 2/3 of the leaves and the bottom branches, right? So always maintain at least 1/3 of the canopy, and that's usually the limit for maintaining the plant healthy. So if you take half of the bottom leaves out, that's not a problem at all for the plant.
Okay, cool. Well, yeah, that's basically what we were doing. But there was about a week after I did that was when the leaf cutters just annihilated them. So I thought, oh no, maybe I
Could be
didn't understand what this thing wanted, but it might have just been a coincidence too.
Yeah, maybe the leaf ender just felt that somebody had started doing that, and then they just followed the.
I said a bad example.
So we're cutting that plant. Let's go there and continue. Maybe.
Yeah, following my lead.
Because they are farmers today.
So another question from Jack: what is the ecological role of vines in a forest? Quickly increase photosynthesis, bring weak plants down. That's perfect, man. You nailed it on the head. These are the two main ecological roles that I see vines performing. That's why you're gonna very often see them, especially in the graded land and the graded forest, and on the borders, on the edges of the forest, because that's when you have more room for them to grow. Like inside dense forest, they're not so common. They're gonna grow in clearings. They're gonna grow in other places where they can kind of thrive. And some vines will bring plants down. Some of them are not. They don't have that role. Right? Some of them just don't. They don't really pull and weigh trees down, but some of them do. And they will quickly increase photosynthesis. That's certain, because they grow so fast and so quick, and they will cover up plants that have lost all of their leaves. So, those weak, sick trees that have a lot of dead branches, don't have many leaves. So the vines are going to come and cover that up and make it green again, and produce lots of organic matter on the way. So yeah, that's pretty much the idea behind vines. And produce delicious fruits, of course. Like passion fruit and grapes and kiwi and all that.
Cool. Yeah, you guys had mentioned that a little bit in passing in a few of your videos, but I just wanted to make sure I understood it correctly. But yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah, it brings wood down, doesn't it? When it gets to that, it brings that tree so much organic matter. It brings down, actually puts wood in the soil. Pretty neat.
Exactly. So another question from Jack: do tree fodders lose nutrition like grass once the tree has gone to seed? Absolutely. The same rules that we apply for grass, you apply for fodder trees, both for feeding animals and for feeding the soil, because it's the same idea. Flowering happens when the plant has accumulated enough. I don't know how you guys call in English. Like, there are two types of sap. You've got like crude sap, and then you've got, we call it elaborated sap in Portuguese. So you've got the sap that comes from the roots, and you've got the sap that comes from the leaves, because it's already been
processed. Do you guys know the different names? Oh, okay. Anyway, you've got these two kind of saps. I'm gonna use the names in Portuguese, which is brute sap and elaborated sap. So elaborated sap comes from the leaves, and brute sap comes from the roots, right? So the plant's gonna absorb water and nutrients, send it to the leaves. The leaves gonna make photosynthesis, enriching that sap with photosynthetic products, and then redistribute to the plant. So flowering happens when the plant has accumulated enough elaborated sap. So it's like it's got reserves. It's going to use those reserves to flower. So right before flowering, it is the moment when it has most nutrients for the animals or for the soil. So it is the same idea. That's why many species, once they start flowering, they're going to drop a lot of leaves. Maybe they don't drop all of the leaves, but they reduce the amount of leaves that they have because they're kind of diverging all that energy to flowering and filling up the seeds. So yeah, that's the idea. The difference between trees and grasses is that trees will usually have a longer resting period. So after pruning, whereas grass will take in good conditions, maybe 30 to 40, 50 days for a new cut. Trees will take a bit longer, 4 or 5 months, something like that.
Okay, and you said it decreases the nutrients available not just to animals but also to feeding the soil. But where do those nutrients go? Do they not go into like the fruit and the seed? So if the fruit and the seed makes its way back to the soil, is that effectively feeding the soils the nutrients back again, or is some of it lost somehow?
It is, but the fruit, the seeds, they take a lot longer to be digested, right? And so it's I mean, just think of a seed, right? It's a very hard thing. So it's not, whereas the leaves and the organic matter will quickly decompose and they will provide more mulch, because the seed is a very concentrated pill, right? So the amount of nutrients in a seed is, I don't know this would actually be a pretty interesting thing to research, how much organic matter is required to have the same amount of nutrients than a small seed. So the mulching effect of organic matter is just, I don't know, hundreds of times higher than seeds and pods. And then of course the seeds and pods, they will take a while till they decompose or sprout and then die or become trees.
Okay, that makes sense. So the nutrients aren't lost necessarily, they're just like condensed in this tiny little wimpy form of matter that's gonna mulch anything. Okay, cool.
Yeah, if we think about the fact that if you get the plant's organic matter, it's gonna have anywhere from like 15 to 20% of dry matter, and a seed is gonna have like 90% dry matter, 85% dry matter. So that's already a huge difference in the water composition. And of course that creates more matter, right? More space. It occupies more volume.
Cool, that makes sense. Okay, thank you.
Yeah, you probably grasped this already, Jack, but just for anyone else, obviously the leaf loses nutrients as it, diverts its nutrients to the seed or to the flower, but also it stalls the tree from growing, stalls that plant, that grass, for producing biomass, so the growth, right? The growth rate. So obviously it stops investing in nutrients on the leaf, and it stops investing in growth as well. So for mulch production, for biomass, once it's seeding, it kind of stalls the growing information. So yeah, so if you prune it just before, it keeps on booming, it keeps on growing. You produce more biomass if that's what you desire. Let me
just ask you one thing before we move on. Are you using the grid view in Zoom? Or are you using the speaker view?
I'm looking at the black grid on for the YouTube, right?
No, I'm talking about Zoom.
So
Are you using the speaker view or the grid? Because there's a view that you see everybody, and there's a view that you see only who's speaking.
All right. Well, I see who's speaking, and on top I see everybody.
Yeah, change that, because in YouTube people can only see who's speaking. I think it's nicer if they can see everybody, because sometimes if somebody makes a noise, it changes the person who's speaking. So it's kind of a.
All right, that's pretty cool. Yeah, sure. So people.
Yeah, I just saw it here, and I saw that it's only. Alan is asking, when I asked about that sap thing, elaborated sap and all that, he's asking if it's xylem and phloem. Not really. The xylem and phloem, they're tissues of the plant which will transport each kind of sap, right? So the xylem is the vascular tissue that will transport the sap from the roots, and the phloem will now it's working in YouTube. And the phloem will redistribute the sap from the leaves. I'm gonna, Gennaro, can you go on and see this question from Wayne? I'm gonna figure out these names so that we won't finish this without them.
Yep, let's crack into that. My current location is 45 degrees south. Summer temperatures can get up to 30s, but normally late 20s. Winter gets down to 5 degrees during the day with -5 frost common. We have planted a small home orchard of a mix of nectarines, cherries, apricots, apple, and pears at approximately 3 meter spacing. Any thoughts of what we could add to the mix to get the variety of strata? All right. So you've got an orchard. You've got your apricots, cherries, nectarine, apple, pears. None of these are really emergent, right? And all low.
Pear is emergent.
Yes, you go as far as calling it emergent, right? Right up there. Maybe you want to have a look at this, Felipe, because it's very specific with climates, and we might have more experience with this. So winter gets down to 5 to -5 is common. Frost is common out there. Some of those species used in Portugal.
Yeah. So cherries, apricots, nectarines, apples, pears. Apricot is okay. I always confuse apricot and persimmon. I have to translate them back in my mind to remember what we're talking about. So yeah, I think persimmons would be a nice addition. I'm not a specialist in temperate climate fruit, so there's some stuff that I'm unsure about. As far as I'm concerned, pears are emergent. Apples and cherries are high stratum. Nectarines and apricots should be like medium to high stratum. One species which I would consider adding is, I don't know if it withstands frost, but I think it does, is, what's the name?
We use casuarinas in Portugal.
Yeah, they could be used for service species, but I'm thinking of a low stratum.
And the prickly pears, fruit species. Yeah, we've got the prickly pears, produce fruit as well.
I don't know if the prickly pear will withstand that sort of. I think there are varieties that might withstand that sort of temperature. Pomegranate, that's what I was trying to remember. Does pomegranate grow there?
You don't really see it, no.
It's kind of wet for pomegranate, I think, right? Even if temperature works. But pomegranate likes a bit more of a dry climate.
You know what the Feijoa? Do you know that one? It's actually a
Feijoa?
South American tree, but New Zealanders claimed it as their own.
Can you write the name in the chat?
Yeah, sure.
Yeah, sometimes we need you guys to do some experiments and get back to us. You know, obviously our climate is different. We, through the principles, you know, if you follow the principles, you achieve the same results. It's different climate still.
I'll just have a look for it.
Oh, all right.
You know
when
that
we
one?
go to these kind of places, we really look around.
Yeah,
we go to,
I've never tried it personally, but I know I've heard about that species. It grows nicely over there.
When we do travel to like you know, different kind of climates that we're not accustomed to, we tend to go to parks, you know, and kind of observe what the local trees are doing. You know, we kind of look around, we see what's happening. You know, we try to observe, you know, the vegetation and, you know, bushes and see what's happening locally. So sometimes you have to look around, you know, look around you and see what's happening naturally to try to identify
exactly.
something.
I would just try to add stuff like some service species, like fast growing emergent species. You could try adding some Casuarinas could be a decent addition for pruning, you know, for organic matter production. Another interesting is ash, I think, work pretty nice. And long term,
I think China berry works out there.
Might work. China berry might work.
I was thinking more of a low stratum to go under the trees to fill in the gaps.
Berries, stuff like blueberries and all of those. You know, what's the other berry called?
Raspberry.
The one that has
Raspberries
from the forest. Got the
blackberries, yes,
blackberries, raspberries. Yep.
Yeah, raspberries are more of a. No, sorry, I'm thinking mulberries. Right? Yeah, raspberries and blackberries. That's it.
Yeah, they
should
quite
work now. Mulberries should work pretty nicely over there as well, I imagine. But they're more of a medium stratum plant, not really low.
Yeah.
And prickly pears as well. Have a look around if there is anything native, if there is any prickly pears regionally, because that works well as well.
Yeah, but it's kind of wet over there, right? It's I mean, New Zealand, it's you can swim on the air, right?
Yeah, it's quite variable. I mean, we might get 40 inches, whatever that is, 1,000 mils where we are. It's not hugely wet.
40 inches,
which is about 1,000
not
mils.
a lot. Yeah, 1,000. But one thing that makes a difference is the air humidity, which I imagine is constantly high.
No, not where we are. We're more semi-alpine. We've got mountains all around us.
Oh, that's cool. I didn't know that existed over there.
No, we have.
Yeah, but that's good. So yeah, maybe if you find varieties of prickly pear that withstand that sort of cold, I think that they might exist.
Yeah.
But yeah, for the low stratum, I would definitely go for the berries. I think that's an important one. You could try Cape Gooseberry as well.
Yep. Yeah. I've seen them grow in the north. I've seen them grow further north than us. I haven't seen them grow down here.
Okay. Well, they die off in winter, so I think it should work fine. You know, they produce in summer, they die off. They just maintain the root system.
Right.
And then they will grow back up. That's what I would think. Yeah, but I think that's pretty much it. What I
Maybe
know
some
of
seasonal
low
stuff,
stratum.
you know, maybe some summer grasses, you know, and then winter grasses, things that you can actually plant, you know, seasonally.
Mm-hmm. Oh, we've got our dreaded cooch that I've talked about before, which has a huge underground rhizomatous root network, which...
What's the name?
Oh, it's cooch. I've talked about it before. COUCH. I've forgotten its.
I think I remember about it.
Yeah, takes over everything.
Yeah, I gotta be careful with that. I'm researching more about this fig Joa. Kind of looks like a guava.
Yeah, it is.
Same
that's
family,
another
right?
name for it. It's another name for it. Well, not. It's got a. It is called that pineapple guava. It's called. And some things.
Mm-hmm.
It's a beautiful plant.
But again, it can you can hedge it, and you can keep it pruned, but it can be just left naturally. It grows quite tall. It would be another medium to high strata, medium strata anyway.
Yeah, I think it looks medium to me because it by the pictures I'm seeing, it invests a lot in shaded branches. Like it doesn't give up shaded branches. So that's, for me, it's a very clear sign of a kind of a medium stratum plant. And the family, the Myrtaceae family, is, of course, you can't generalize 100%, but it's a family that has a lot of medium and low stratum species, a lot of them. So the family is typically a shade family. Does it taste like guava?
We don't grow guavas here.
But you've tried guava in your life.
Oh yeah, but only canned processed guavas.
Oh, canned.
Yeah.
Wow, you've never tried a fresh guava in your life?
No.
Isn't it funny that that can actually happen? Like for us around here, it's impossible to conceive that somebody has never tried a guava in their lives, and yet there are people around the world in other parts that have never tried it. And I'm sure there are a bunch, like I've never tried fig Joa in my life. Probably everybody over there has tried it.
Oh, that's lovely. It's a beautiful fruit if you get it right. Get it at the right thing of maturity. But
another species that Gareth, who's also in New Zealand, loves and wants to produce, and it seems to me to be kind of a medium to low stratum as well, is Tamarillo.
Yeah, too cold for Tamarillo down here. Where he is, I mean, where he's growing, you could probably add another 5 degrees temperature to what we get. And he has high humidity. So we used to grow Tamarillo when we lived in the north of the country. We used to grow Tamarillo. But yeah.
Okay, I see. Yeah, so I think that's that. Man. I think you're gonna have to go with the berries.
Right.
Cool.
The berries should work nice.
I just want to reach out to the people on YouTube there. If you haven't smashed that like button, that's a way to support us right there. We appreciate it if you guys there. And before we wrap it up, if anyone's got any questions as well, any final questions, we've gone through the questions on the Patreon platform.
Exactly.
Yeah, in YouTube here, Alan's saying if we haven't checked out Thermodynamics, yeah, we've checked them out. They released a cool video out recently, and they're really inspiring as well out in New Zealand, right? They're doing some cool
do you know them, Wayne? Have you been following them?
Who have I been following?
Thermodynamics.
Oh, no, I haven't.
Oh, you should definitely look them up in Instagram, and I don't know if they probably have a YouTube channel as well. they're doing agroforestry over there in New Zealand. They've got
Okay.
some nice systems, and they're in the patron community as well, but they're just not very active. But they've been doing some very nice work over there.
Right. I'll touch base with them.
And for a while, actually, I think it's over 20 years now. You know, these guys had studied with Ernest, you know, like over 20 years ago. So they've got some real developed systems out there, and they do a lot of educating out in New Zealand. A lot of our friends
they run some courses.
Yeah, we've met quite a few cool people from New Zealand that were actually, you know, that's where where the birth of their education came from.
Right.
So they're doing a really cool job.
Yeah, I'm looking on the website now, and yeah, they're at the opposite end of the country to us.
Mm-hmm.
But
Yeah,
but keep in touch.
north.
I mean,
they're further.
they'll have
Yeah,
people which
yeah.
nearby, you know, and
yeah, that's
other
sort of come
branches
from.
and
Yeah, they're up where Gareth is.
Yeah.
Well, close to where Gareth is.
I think Gareth is like 20, 30 minutes from them or something like that.
Yeah.
Cool.
I've been missing Gareth in our calls, man. I've been missing Gareth.
Yeah,
It's 6 o'clock in the morning when we start these things now.
Oh, but he's always been so dedicated. The last I heard, the lady he was working for, I think she went with cancer, and then, you know, they were unmotivated to keep on progressing.
Yeah, they had some.
And then he had a sad loss, a family member.
But I'm pretty sure they
Accident as
were
well.
looking to buy land. I remember he sent me an email, and
Yeah.
I wonder if I ever answered that email. I should check that out. But Wayne, I'm gonna be with my mind active to think about other stuff that we can add to your system.
Yeah, that would be good.
If any ideas come to me, I will let you know.
Cool. Thank you.
Cool. And
All right, guys. So I think.
all right, guys. Any further questions? Can we wrap it up?
No.
All right,
That's
let's
it
wrap
for
it
me.
up. Thanks a lot for participating. It's always a pleasure. People in YouTube, thank you for watching. We hope this is enjoyable for you. If you guys want to participate as well, you can hop in the Patron community and join us. And we'll see you next month for another live Q&A. And of course, more videos will be coming in the upcoming Saturdays.
Cool, guys. Thanks a lot.
All right. Catch
Okay,
you later.
thank you,
See you
everyone.
guys.
Take
Bye-bye.
care, everybody.
Bye.
Bye.
Take care. Good catching up. Until next time.